Welcome into our Busch Stadium studios. It is the Cardinals Insider Podcast. So glad that you could join us. Brett McMillan, Elizabeth Meineke, and we are pleased to be joined today by Anuk Karunaratne, the SVP, that is Senior Vice President for Business Operations. Anuk, thanks for coming down and hanging out. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, glad to do it.
So let's just start with this. I mean, people who work in the business world will understand what an SVP is and does, but within the context of pro sports, we are a regular business like a lot of the other ones out there in the wild, but we're also a little different in some ways. So what does kind of your role look like on a day-to-day and big picture? Give fans an idea of that.
Yeah, so my role primarily focuses on business operations, which for us is our sales function, so ticket sales, sponsorship, marketing, so our advertising, our content productions, our broadcast relationships, and then some of our back office functions like strategy and analytics, IT, HR. So that's kind of where I spend most of my time. And part of that is operational. There's stuff that's happening. Today's a game day. It's everything from are we ready for today's game from a staffing and a fan entertainment standpoint to thinking longer term and planning. And so I think once you get to SVP level in any job, you're kind of balancing a lot of competing priorities and short term versus long term, so it keeps it interesting, at least that way.
It definitely has been an interesting time, a pivot point in many ways in Cardinals history. And give us an idea, we know, but again, for fans who maybe aren't familiar, kind of when you entered the timeline here with the Cardinals and, generally what that experience has been like. And I know that you put a lot of thought and a lot of your time goes into this. So.
Yeah, so it was probably almost exactly 2 years ago that I started conversations about coming here, and it was it's like with anything else, it's a process to think about what makes sense for you as a next step. But by the end of that decision making process, I had gotten to a place where it made sense to me for a lot of reasons. The strength and the tradition and the history of this organization, what it means from a baseball standpoint to so many fans in our region. And I mean, it's one of the most prestigious sports brands, not just baseball, but across all of professional sports. And so it's a unique opportunity. It's a unique juncture in the history of the franchise. So all of those reasons made it kind of compelling for me. I started in late February of 2024. So right before all of the craziness of opening day and the start of the season happens. And now I am probably call it 18 months into the role. So that's roughly the time frame.
Well, and I know you were with the Blue Jays at the time, but this isn't your first stint in the St. Louis area, right? You had
Correct.
been here before?
Yeah. So I went to college here. I went to WashU. I lived here from 2001 to 2005, or 2006 actually. And it was a pretty good time for sports in St. Louis. The Cardinals had some pretty good teams during that window, and the Cardinals won the World Series right as I had decided to leave, which in retrospect maybe should have stayed longer. And it was the greatest show on turf time, so it kind of showcased to me how much sports means to people in St. Louis and the region. And I think it's one of the coolest things about getting to have that interaction with fans be a big part of your job day to day.
So that was something you saw even before you were working in sports, that there was a passion and a fervor here. I think that's true in all 30 MLB markets, certainly true in Toronto where you came from, great sports town. But I think those of us who have any kind of association with St. Louis, we're a little biased. Like, it is a great sports town. So you saw that as somebody who didn't grow up here but lived here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people care about sports. You've seen it not just with the Cardinals, but we support all of our local, teams from soccer to hockey. And that's, I think, just a testament to how much people care about sports here. But baseball is special. And I think, the history here of 150 years plus of professional baseball in St. Louis makes it really unique. And contrasting that with where I came from in Toronto, which I think the franchise will celebrate its 50th anniversary in 2027, we have multi-generational fan support, and it means it's more meaningful than just this season's results or, just recent history. It has a familial connection and goes into, personal tradition, not just team tradition. So it's really cool to see that. And it definitely stands out as someone who is coming back here for not my first time, but after a long hiatus.
As you were stepping into your role, I imagine there's part of that, like you talked about, multi-generational. That's a great point. There's something exciting there because people are bought in. They care a lot. But anytime people care a lot, you know, if you're trying to change things, if you're trying to move in a direction that maybe is contemporary over here, there's always going to be somebody that says, well, we really liked it the way it was, fill in the blank. Again, I grew up in St. Louis, so I feel like I can say we do that a lot. You know, we like to hold on to the things that we like about our surroundings. So for you, as you kind of were stepping in, knowing St. Louis, but an outside perspective coming back to town, was that exciting to have tradition and say, okay, how do we help push it forward, and how do I lead that? Was it daunting? Was it yes and? What did that feel like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I think it's an exciting challenge. And I think if you think of what our goal is, you know, despite people's feelings about where we are now, which I think everyone agrees with, you know, we're in a place where we're seeking to get better. And back to a standard that this organization has set repeatedly over the course of its long history. Our goal is to create a 20-year run like the one we just came off of. And that's a challenge, you know, because those things don't happen often, but you don't get the opportunity to take on those challenges very often. And so it's exciting, and that comes with its own, you know, balances that we'll have to, whether that's balancing you know, tradition with innovation or anything like that. But I think the goal is we want to have a team that's successful on the field and successful off the field and is repeatedly in contention, you know, over a long period of time. And in order to do that, we're going to have to make some changes. And I think those changes aren't for the sake of change. It's just that success in the context of today is going to have to look different than the success in the context of 20 years ago. You know, we have to be open-minded to understand what things we need to change, and equally importantly, what things we need to preserve, whether that's preserving things that are inherently strengths about the culture here, internally and in our clubhouse, or things that are, you know, need to be preserved in terms of history and tradition, and legacy of the brand itself and its connection to our fans. We have to respect and honor that tradition, but not at the expense of what our ultimate goal is, which is to compete and win today and in the future.
What are some of those things that you feel you guys have identified so far? And do you feel that kind of the mandate that you've been given on the business side mirrors what's happening on the baseball operations side as well as they go through, you know, transition? And how do you see what you're doing and what your responsibilities are supporting what Baseball Ops is doing to make sure that we go back to a run like you just described?
Yeah. Where should I start with that multi-part question? I mean, I think that there's definitely parallels between what's happening on the baseball operations side with Heim starting, in the sense that, you know, new leadership creates change, both good and bad. You know, there's a period of evaluation, and then you start to see, you know, things evolve, and you hope that those things, the new things, happen in concert and flow smoothly with everything else. So I think that there's a parallel there. In the end, baseball operations functions separately from the things we're focused on in the business, but the relationship between the two is ultimately that we're trying to affect the same goal. And, you know, there's places that ultimately we're seeking competitive advantage, right? And I won't talk about all of the ways we do that on the baseball side, but on the business side, how we engage with our fans and the level of support we have from our fans is an inherent strength for us. The reason that we've been able to outperform expectations of St. Louis as a small Midwestern city, from an attendance standpoint and a revenue standpoint, has been a significant reason why we've been able to outperform expectations on the field. And that's true not just in the last 20 years. That's, you know, we've been able to do that for 100 years plus. And so I think, you know, that's the relationship. And so I think the mindset is similar and the goal is the same, is both sides of the organization need to help us outperform objective expectations, because it's not an objective expectation that we're going to have a 20-year run of success. But that's what we're striving for. So I think it takes a mindset of we're focused relentlessly on the things we need to improve. For us, that's how we deliver a better experience for our fans, how we strengthen and grow the relationships that we have with our fans. And ultimately, that can translate into, a sustainably competitive team and, payroll levels that we can fund to maintain that competitiveness. So I think there's some parallels, but obviously differences as well in terms of where we're focused.
What has been some of the things that you guys feel like you've received this message from the fans of, okay, this is important to them, this is something that they want changed, that we should be focusing on? And what are some of those things that you've heard where they've come back, and said, listen, we like this, this is something, these are things that in your mind you're like, all right, we want to make sure that we keep this aspect of the tradition?
Yeah. Well, this year we really just spent a lot of effort on understanding what fans want. Like when we talk about the game day experience as an example, before making changes, what we wanted to do was understand what's important to people, and on the top of that list is winning. We get that. But there's also other reasons that you might attend a game. And a lot of those have to do with the experience you have, whether that's at the very beginning, whether you feel safe and secure coming down here, whether there's points of friction along the way in terms of getting in or out of the building, to the experience that you have when you're in the building with the people that you're here with. And we're really thinking about all of those, touch points along the way and asking ourselves, what do people care about? What are things that are within our control that we can affect to make the experience better? I think there's been a lot of learnings. Some of those learnings have reinforced conventional wisdom. Some of those learnings, have maybe caused us to question that and think about things differently. One of the things we're putting a lot of focus on this year is that, different fans want different things out of an experience when they come down to the game. And so we need to understand what those differences are in order to be able to deliver on them. So if you're a young family, you may care about a completely different set of things if you're coming with 2 young kids like I have, than if you're coming with clients, or if you're coming with a group of guys that you're buddies with, or you're coming with your grandparents. And what we're trying to do is to be more intentional about what do each of these different groups want, how are we fulfilling on that, the promise of what that experience and what the interactions are when you're here, to amplify the overall effect of coming down here. Ultimately we're competing for people's time and money and attention, and that has to be earned. And there's things that are within our control that can lead people to make the kinds of choices that we want, and that's kind of what we're focused on.
And in 2025, that is increasingly harder and harder because there's so many places now, even in your own living room, to spend your time and your entertainment dollars.
It is, yeah.
And we see now, we're not naive. It's no secret. Fewer folks in the seats at points this year than we are accustomed to. And I think everything that you've said is the level of seriousness that we take in trying to make it worthwhile for people to come down and spend their time and their money with us. But something that I've found to be kind of heartening is there's still that fervor in the marketplace. I think we all probably experience it just in our lives, running into people. They find out what you do and they have opinions. And we also see that with the way that fans are still paying attention even when they're not in the building. Tell me a little about that and just kind of the process and the way that you look at, okay, what is the interest in the product that maybe even is outside of that number that gets listed in the box score every night?
Yeah, I think one of the unique things about, especially having moved here, working for the Cardinals, living in St. Louis, is how much the Cardinals mean to people in day-to-day lives. How much time of all of the water cooler conversation that occurs is focused on the Cardinals, or on the radio coverage or the TV coverage or anything else. And I think that goes back to how important the organization is and what it means to live in St. Louis and feel some sense of civic pride. And I think that's also why people are extra frustrated when things don't play out the way we all want them to. But I think there's a difference between frustration and apathy. And, you can criticize decision making. You can be upset at results. Those are emotions that people inside these walls feel the same way that people outside feel them. It's just our job to, get to work to putting us in a place where we want to be. But I think that, that frustration shows a level of care. People care deeply about the Cardinals, and they want us to be successful, and that's going to raise the level of day-to-day excitement and happiness. And so, that's a responsibility. But I think, and I call out that nuance because people are still engaged. Whether you're looking at social media, and maybe the comments are a little bit more negative than the historical average, but people are still commenting and they care. The same thing is true with TV viewership. This year, one of our big goals is the TV landscape has evolved. People are cutting the cord. Is that fewer and fewer people had access to watch our games. And so this year we took some big steps to try to make sure that if you wanted to watch Cardinal baseball that you could. So we partnered with Gray Media to do 10 over-the-air games, so free games that anyone could watch on 10. Actually, there's going to be an 11th game later this month, which is great. And then we also launched a streaming option for fans. So if you don't have cable and you don't have TV, or you prefer to just stream the games, you could opt for that as well. And so our goal was to create optionality for people, right? And it's the same thing I was talking about with the game day experience. Like, we view our job as we need to give people options and meet them where they're at, and then hopefully they choose something that feels a bit more relevant to them. But the combination of all of those efforts this year has really increased our viewership. So if you take our cable audience, which people have always been able to watch on cable, and add in the over-the-air viewership and add in the streaming viewership, our viewership is up nearly 20% this year compared to last year. And, you'd put that into contrast with what you're seeing in the stadium itself. And I think it goes back to your point that people are still engaged. They're watching. We need to do more to make them get off their couch and come down to the ballpark. And that's what we're focused on. And I think over time, we will achieve that goal in terms of getting them off the couch. But we're glad that they're taking advantage on their couches of being able to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get someone to watch video of anything in 2025 because there's so much segmentation. I was on the road trip last week, and I don't think I turned the TV on in my hotel room one time. Now, I did watch a couple of shows on my iPad that I wanted to catch up on. So, again, there's just so many different outlets, so much fragmentation. So, to me, to see our fans check in that way on the games, that's a big deal, I think, and something Cardinal fans should be very proud of. I know we work hard to make it accessible, to make it a product that they want. Chip and Brad are awesome presenters, but the fans, it's a big hats off to them that they want to and they engage in the product, even when sometimes they might be a little frustrated with things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes back to the level of care. Yeah.
I remember Chris Carpenter said once, and I thought this was so fascinating, we were talking about, I think, something of his just intensity and how he approached pitching as his job. And he said, I realized that everyone, when they go to the grocery store in St. Louis, if they are somehow affiliated with the St. Louis Cardinals, my performance reflects on every single person who works here. He's like, I want anyone who works here, regardless of their role, to be able to, go to the store and have someone come up to them and talk about the Cardinals and be able to, take pride in what that means. So it is a unique thing about this market. And it was interesting to hear someone who had achieved his level of success understand that level of deep care. That just is so pervasive throughout the city in a positive way.
Yeah. And I think that's important for all of us, that work here to remember that. Like, ultimately, without our fans, we wouldn't have what we have here. And so everything we do, we think about through that lens. And I think, and we've talked about this in our internal meetings and otherwise, that's ultimately who we're thinking about. And as we think on the business side of every decision that we're making it through the lens of what would our fans want. And, you know, I know we're talking a lot about the business side and people want results now, but it is more of a long-term mindset, right? And I think we're trying to make incremental improvements that over time will feel like, you know, they've been meaningful changes. We're not trying to find bright, shiny objects that we can point to in the short term, you know, because that's not going to get us to our goal.
Yeah, good things take time. I mean, plainly put. And you know, if you do something right over a long period of time, that slow burn, then hopefully it sticks around. And that's part of the thought process. You've got another meeting to get to, I think, but I want to hit this on the way out. You know, leadership matters in every walk and segment of life. I personally would say I think it matters in sports maybe a little bit more for this reason. We're sitting here, tonight will be game 151 out of 162. So every person in this building is tired at this moment. But the reason we show up and check in is because we love the Cardinals, you know, we love St. Louis, and there has to be a clear why out there, right? It has to be more than just a job. Otherwise, why would you go at it and put your family through what you do in this industry? It's a blessing, but it's hard. Something I've really appreciated about you is I know you're a leadership guy, right? You don't just want to manage. You don't just want to push people towards things. It's not about authority. It's about showing people why they should care and helping, you know, a group of quality people cultivate their why. So tell me about why that's important to you and maybe how leadership became a thing that you found value in, you know, in your life, because I do think it's important in this industry.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important in every industry, but you could say it's especially important in sports for sure.
It would be easy for someone in your role to show up and say, okay, I'm going to try to actualize results today. And they're just going to try to push people in punch list. But that doesn't really sustain.
Yes.
Ultimately, what sustains is saying, this is the vision of where we're going. Would you follow me as we go there?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, if you care about results, and like I've said, I care about sustainable results in the long run. You know, the only way we're going to get there is by being best in class, right? We've got, and this, you know, this is going to be true of the business side and the baseball side, is we've got to outcompete 29 other baseball teams to win. And we've got to do that on the field, and we've got to do it off the field, and we've got to do both of those things sustainably in order to reach our goal. You know, that's not going to take one person's effort. You know, it doesn't matter how good I am. It doesn't matter how good Haim is, or any other one single individual. It's going to take a group of people all pulling in the same direction, all contributing, all of them finding ways to make us better and outperform objective expectations. And so for me, the only way you get to that is by putting people in a position where they feel a sense of ownership, accountability, and can make an impact at a level that we wouldn't be able to if we just simply ask people to do tasks. Because there's, again, it goes back to, like, I wouldn't be able to come up with a task list for 150 or 200 people that was more effective than asking those people to make us better with the right set of directions and resources and objectives. So, you know, I think it's when you're in a leadership position, you realize that the leverage lies in getting the most out of your people. And the way to get the most out of your people is to lead and lead effectively and, you know, hold high standards, but create collective shared accountability, which, you know, in my experience is going to get you further in the long run than, you know, trying to drive short-term thinking or trying to just be, you know, overly controlling. So it comes down to what kind of culture do you want to create. And, you know, to me, a championship culture is one where every single person knows how they contribute and finds ways to go above and beyond. It's the same thing on the baseball field. You know, you've got to create a culture where every single player finds a way to exceed their expectations in their own way, but all moving us towards the same goal, which is to win. So if you want to draw that parallel, maybe that's why it feels more, you know, appropriate in a sports context. But I think those principles apply in any context in business.
That's awesome. I'm excited. It's been fun. It should be hopefully a fun rest of the season and a fun 2026 and beyond. Anuk, thank you for the time today and coming down and chatting with us.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.
For Anuk and Elizabeth, I'm Brett. If you want to check out any of our previous conversations, Rapsorfolio, Bill DeWitt III was on with us last time, or any of the other great in-depth Cardinals Insider podcast conversations, head on over to our YouTube or anywhere that you can listen to podcasts. We'll catch you next time on the Cardinals Insider Podcast.